very much. Over now, completely different to researching the smells.
Very, very different. Again, sort of likewise, I similarly feel a bit of a fraud being here, but I am very interested in cities. And I come from an art and design background. And I research smells in cities. And what my main interest in with my practice-based research is to actually find ways of representing how the lived experience of smell in city can be then represented for shared interpretation. It's a joke amongst my friends that they just call me Smelly Kate because there were a lot of Kates at Edinburgh where I was studying and other people doing different things and I was doing smells. The beautiful part about this is that it's working very much on a huge quantitative data set and what it's creating is an enormous database of the human experience of smells in cities, how people name them, how they define them. And I also look, because I'm working in this strange sort of qualitative-quantitative mix, I'm also asking people about their perception of the length of the smell, the duration of it, how intense it is, its hedonic scale, and also looking at their associative responses to it, as well as if they were going to find a way to describe that smell in a way that language didn't work, what colour would they associate with those smells? And then I use that data to create maps. Where I started from was deconstructing a city based on different sensory perceptions, and this is a taste map of Edinburgh. So the senses are very important in my work. This is an elevation map, and it's a day of a typical, slightly exaggerated Scottish diet with cumulative fat. This is made from lard, and when it exhibits and it gets warmer and warmer because of the lights in the exhibition hall, it starts to sort of like generally sort of like seep away in the background. Again, I use the human figures on there just to create a complete sort of like idea. This ended up looking like the crags in Edinburgh, if anybody's familiar with it, completely by accident. And I just thought it'd be very sweet to have people walking up this sort of like fatty intake as they were going through their day. The smellscape, my understanding of it is that it's more than just a series of individual points. It actually has a shape and a form and a texture and a structure. And so a part of my work seeks to try and understand how that might be perceived and interpreted. And this was based on a workshop that I did in Marseille earlier this year. And we were looking at different sections of the city, just divided it into 12 sectors. And this was one group's work where they had a representative scale for the different types of smells that existed, but also had a lot of olfactory space. And that is something that recurs time and time again. The way that I research this is by having increasingly larger and larger scale smell walks. So the idea of that embodied method is very important. I take people out, and they're not smell tours, they're very much smell walks. And what I'm asking people to do is to record and sometimes share with the body system or in groups at certain key points the process of smelling the city. I take this through now two sort of like sequential forms. One is in a sort of like an awareness raising where they do smell catching, which is you just let anything sort of like drift past your nose, so it's temporarily foregrounding the olfactory. Smell catching, you think about what's there, you think nose first rather than eyes first. And then smell hunting is where you use other sensorial inputs to define and to find places where you think that interesting smells might be found. So in this instance, we've got somebody sniffing inside a bin. And I'm interested in the very, very fine grained stuff because what has come about through a number of years of doing this now is that the smells that people expect to occur aren't necessarily there. So there isn't always a correlation between bin and the smell of trash. Sometimes there's orange peel that's on the surface of it, and that's what's predominant. Or menthol comes out because somebody's just put some fresh chewing gum in there. And it's about breaking down those barriers of expectation. This, I hope, works because what I do with these is I create these visuals, and smells hitchhike. They borrow air currents, they move, they disappear. In order for us to be able to smell them, they need to volatilise. As they're doing that, they will disappear completely. And one of the things I'm looking at is ways that, and this does move. So this is an animation of an Amsterdam smellscape. Underneath, this is designed to be sort of projected onto the ground so that you walk through it as an immersive experience. These are the smells that were detected. There were 650 smell notes from a piece of work I did there a couple of years ago. And these are some of the smells that appear, and then how they actually move in relation to the wind. Bear in mind this is an interpretation, it's not taking factual data at this point. That's something that I'm working on, is combining the wind data with human perception at precise moments in time. But this is a summary statement, and then the idea is that these smells, they do just disappear. They're no longer there. So I'm looking at theories of temporality to give a sort of like a framework for the smellscape. In order to do these designs, another method that I use is the visual. So I'm creating forms. I'm looking and saying, okay, here was, there were about 200 people. I've got several thousand smell notes or smell detections that were in Singapore in June this year. This is an initial study, and it looks at, what I did was I took the areas that we walked in, pulled out the most common smell in each area, then looked to see if it occurred or not in the other areas. I was really interested in the differences between day and night. There's a lot more work that I need to do with this data set yet. Then, depending on the scale of it, if it was regarded as a very long, intense smell, then it has more layers going outwards, and if it lasted a long time, those layers are bundled on top of each other. I'm recreating this, or part of this, in 3 dimensions at the moment to actually give an idea about smell duration. So this for me is a way of starting to understand the sort of like the form and texture that a smellscape might have, and then again to actually animate it, to have it appear as a living entity in its own right. Another way that I work with them is that I'll actually work to reproduce those smells. A number of times I will make the smells myself using a distillation process. Other times, for longevity, I'll work with fragrance houses. And this was a piece of work on Amsterdam. And what we did here is that I identified the smells that existed, and then IFF recreated them as single scents, and then put them together to create a fragrance as an overall identity, olfactory identity for Amsterdam. Some of the things that occurred were old books, blur, old books, waffles, flower explosion. It was a walk. The walks were done in the spring. The exhibition happened 12 months later in a similar sort of like time and space. Another way that I express this is very experiential. This was in Milan, and I worked with a distiller, and we created our preconceived notions of what the smells of Milan might be, based on different architectural forms. And then I went away and drew all these different buildings, and we stuck them roughly on the map and said, okay, here's the smell of incense coming out of the Duomo. Here's the smell of gin and tonic coming out of La Palooza nightclub. Here's the smell of paper coming out of the library. And it was there as a provocation, because during the Milan Design Week, what we wanted to do is we wanted to say to people, look, please tell us what actually exists. What do you know about your city? Not, don't accept ours. Graffiti on these buildings, tell us what's really here. And so from this, we then have graffitied buildings and a graffitied map that then have another interpretation again. I then worked to actually create and had a go at the distillation process, and worked at Canterbury. I work down in Canterbury, so I've got access to an exhibition centre there, a museum that I can exhibit in, which is a very good test ground for me, just to be able to find out how these pieces go down. One of the things that I noticed, Canterbury has quite an international audience. It's an historical heritage centre, heritage site. And people from Spain, France, Portugal really got it much more quickly than people from further north. I don't know whether that's down to some form of being more attuned to smell because they're in warmer environments and smell is actually more prevalent in those environments. But smells do slow down as it gets colder, and that accounts for the fact that in the winter the garbage truck doesn't smell as bad as it does in the summer. I recreated these smells so that they were motion activated, and so they come out through the map. And what happened with it is that for the first time people could actually share a smell. Rather than sharing a perception of a smell, they could actually pick it up and hand it over to somebody else and they could smell it. And this is just a very short snap of video about some school children doing that and playing with those smells.
Trap it like that and then it comes out really wet trying to get it. Yeah, it does. Where? Catching smells.
But it was fascinating to watch people actually be able to, for the first time, share their experience with somebody else. And then they wrote down what they actually thought about it, how they described it. One of the method that I use to collect this data is, I call it smell note. And it has the characteristics that I explained before. So it's a smell name, expected or not, intensity level, duration, preference, association that they have with it. I've always done it manually, and I like it because it's an inscribed method. It makes people feel connected. They're actually really struck with it. And there's an engagement that happens as a result of that, sort of writing something down. I've developed it as an app, and we did a test earlier on this year. And what I noticed is that with the smell notes, generally, there is a list of them on the page. So you have about sort of like 13 to fill in, 12 that you notice during the walk, and then one summary smell. With the app, people tended to only fill in 2 or 3, because there wasn't actually the sort of like the whole listing. So what I'm wanting to do this year is to develop that app further, to find out if we can find a way of recreate that idea of collecting digitally what is currently collected manually. That process of transcribing those manual smell notes is something that I would dearly like to get rid of as well, because it's a very long process, even though I get very familiar with the data as I'm doing it. Another method that I use in this whole process is the data visualization. I'm very much looking to say, get rid of the methodology behind it. All I want you to see is actually the map. This is what I'm presenting. But it takes into account cartographic methods of those selection, classification, simplification, and then finding the symbols for it. This is from Newport Smell Map. And the symbology that I've developed is one that looks like isolines, but they don't behave like isolines. They're non-laminar, because smells actually overlap. A true isoline would never actually do that. There's a performative element to it as well, in that as people at the exhibitions, when I'm showing these maps, this is Glasgow, it's backlit so that you get the idea of it being in the Dreich. It was researched during the winter months, so it's like a damp, rainy mist. And then the smells are in bottles. And there's a key on the map, but there's no key on the smells. So in a way, what I'm asking people to do is to actually be daring enough to sniff what's there and to say, can you then identify it? Do you connect with the visualization? I'm very lucky. The number of projects that I work with are generally arts-based. So the healthy skepticism that I receive on a daily basis when people say you do what, is somewhat removed when I get interested people who are quite willing to walk around their cities, sniff their park benches, stick their noses in bins and do various other mildly transgressive behaviours. But one of the challenges of working with smell is that it's very hard to substantiate. You can't go back and say, oh, look over there, because by that point it's gone. And any number of times I have recordings of people saying, we had a smell but we lost it, and okay, there it is back again. The literature splits smell into background smells which are generally a constant. So in Singapore, for example, there will be the humid smells, but also a lot of cooking smells, a spicy smell that was identified by the smell walkers themselves. On top of that, there are episodic smells that are associated with specific urban structures or behaviours. So cooking smells will emanate from certain parts of town. The smells of markets will be at a certain point in the town or city at a certain time of day. What I really love are the little smells that sit on top, which are the ones that are the small and undiscovered smells that make our cities a part of our everyday lives. They're very much a part of it, but rarely do we actually stop to comment on them. And with that comes some incredibly beautiful lyric qualities. That the stale beer smell on the sidewalk in Brooklyn was called the smell of shattered dreams by another person. So there's the associative element as well as the very literal element. And we lack a vocabulary for smell. What I'm seeking to do with this work is develop alternative, sometimes I call it a forced synesthesia, where you have to think from smell into another way of being able to express and present that data.
Thank you.
Thank you.